in hearings as a way to exonerate yourself. For example, in the limitations section, it reads, we could not examine every source code component and test in the apps in every circumstance, which means our methods could not find every security issue, privacy violation, and censorship event. So it's an incomplete assessment. The report notes that TikTok's data collection using third-party trackers was in apparent conflict with the GDPR and that multiple themes were censored by TikTok. What is shocking to me is the shared source code between TikTok in the United States and the CCP-censored Douyin. The Citizen Labs report says that many of the functions and classes were identical, and that the differences in behavior between TikTok in the United States and Douyin in China are slight changes in hard-coded values. Incredibly, specific censorship parameters from Douyin are present in TikTok, but just turned off. The authors say that for unknown reasons, the parameter variable itself is preserved. So while Citizen Lab may have been afraid to say the obvious conclusion, Mr. Chu, I am not, TikTok's source code is riddled with backdoors and CCP censorship devices. Here's the truth. In a million lines of code, the smallest shift from a 0 to a 1 on just one of thousands of versions of TikTok on the market will unlock explicit CCP censorship and access to American data. Mr. Chu, as CEO of TikTok, why have you not directed your engineers to change this source code?
Congressman, thank you for the question.
Have you directed them to change the source code?
Like what we are offering and my fourth commitment?
Have you directed them to change that source code?
Congressman, if you give me a bit of time to just...
No, I don't. It's a yes or no question. Have you directed your engineers to change that source code?
I'm not sure I understand.
Why are you allowing TikTok to continue to have the capacity for censorship, and yet you claim here that you don't? Let me remind you of something. Do you realize that making false and misleading statements to Congress is a federal crime?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so have you directed your engineers to change that source code?
I am giving third-party access monitoring by experts, and Congressman, you are an expert on this. You could agree with me that no other company
TikTok
does
source code is the same as Douyin? What percentage?
I can get back to you on the specifics.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Where was the source code for TikTok developed? Was it developed in China or in the United States?
It's a global collaborative effort. Like a lot of companies.
Was it developed in China? Some of it?
Some of it is.
Okay, at ByteDance. When it's compiled in the compilation process, can bytecode be manipulated? We've talked a lot about source code. What about the bytecode, the ones and zeros that actually execute on the device? Can it be manipulated?
Yes. Congressman, to give you comfort, that's why we're giving third-party monitors. Yes. As an expert, I think you can agree that very few companies...
I've got the report here by Citizen Lab. I want to read you something from Ron Deibert. Specifically, in your written testimony to Congress, you stated on page 9, Citizen Lab found that there was no overt data transmission by TikTok to the Chinese government and that TikTok did not contact any servers within China. You implied that Citizen Lab exonerated TikTok from any information sharing with China. Well, the director of Citizen Lab saw this and issued a statement correcting the record yesterday. And I'm quoting Ron Deibert, the director of the lab. I am disappointed that TikTok executives continue citing the Citizen Labs research in their statements to government as somehow exculpatory. I've called them out on this in the past, and it's unfortunate that I have to do it again, unquote. He goes on to say, and I quote, we even speculated about possible mechanisms through which the Chinese government might use unconventional techniques to obtain TikTok user data via pressure on ByteDance, end of quote. Mr. Chu, you sent Congress written testimony citing this lab as a support of your claim that China cannot access user data, U.S. user data. And now this lab has come out to say, we never said that. That's misleading, Mr. Chu. I hope you understand what that is. That's misleading. Mr. Chu, this is yet another instance of TikTok attempting to mislead Americans about what their technology is capable of and who has access to their information. Madam Madam Chair, I'd like to.
Madam Chair, I would like to respond to that very quickly.
Ron Biebert and the Citizens Lab into the record.
Without objection.
With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair yields to the gentleman from Maryland. Mr. Sarbanes, 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Chu, I'm going to pick up on a theme we've already covered here, which is the effect that your platform, along with many other social media platforms, by the way, has in terms of mental and behavioral health in this country. I won't speak to what's happening elsewhere in the world, but we've talked about the impact that it's having on children, on teens. We took some action last year in this committee to try to improve access to resources, reauthorize critical programs to address mental health needs, but we need to do even more than that. And we got to address what the big tech companies like TikTok are doing, because those are platforms that expose children, teens to additional risks. The more time that middle and high schoolers spend on social media, the evidence is the more likely they are to experience depression and anxiety. And this is particularly troubling since apparently 16% of American teenagers report that they use TikTok, quote, almost constantly. That's, I think, about 5 million teenagers in this country that are on TikTok all the time. And we know that big tech, including TikTok, uses design features that can manipulate users, including children and teens, to keep them engaged, designed to feed them a never-ending stream of content, keep their attention for hours on end, which includes capitalizing on the desire for others' approval through like features, preying on the fear of missing out through push notifications and so forth. Again, you're part of an industry that's set up to do this. You, in some sense, don't appear to be able to help yourselves in reaching out and finding that new user and then holding on to them. TikTok itself has acknowledged that these features and others, like the endless scroll feature, can have an outsized effect on teens. And we've been discussing today how your app only intensifies that harm by amplifying dangerous content and misinformation. I don't want to be too paternalistic here, because we have young people in the audience. We've got TikTok users that are watching this hearing, and I'm sure they have their own ideas about how this technology is being managed by TikTok and other social media platforms. They like to access the platforms, and they should be able to do that safely. So it's certainly in their interest, and they can drive this conversation, I think, perfectly well. But it's not a fair fight, is it? I mean, the algorithms are on one side of the screen. The human brain is on the other side of the screen, drowning in these algorithms. In many instances, at an age where the brain's not even fully developed yet. So those addictive impulses are being sort of perfected by the technology. And again, it leaves the users sort of helpless in the face of that. Are you looking at ways to redesign core features like the ones I mentioned to be less manipulative, and addictive for users? And can you commit to making some of those modifications here today?
Congressman, thank you. We do want to be leading in terms of safety of our users, particularly for teenagers. We were the first to launch a 60-minute watch limit.
Yeah, let's talk about the 60-minute launch.
And I'm very glad to see people, others in our industry follow. For many of your recommendations, we'll study them very seriously. Yeah. We actually have a series of features. Like, for example, if you're under 16, you cannot use a direct messaging feature because we want to protect those younger users. If you're under 16, you cannot go viral by default. If you're under 18, you cannot go live. And
let me go back to the 60-minute limit, because my understanding is that teens can pretty easily bypass the notification to continue using the app if they want to. I mean, let's face it, our teens are smarter than we are by half. And they know how to use the technology, and they can get around these limits if they want to. Are you measuring how many teens continue to exceed the 60 minutes of time on that app?
We
Sense
understand.
how that's working?
We understand those concerns. Our intention is to have the teens and their parents have these conversations about what is the appropriate amount of time for social media. That's why we give the parents what we call family
Let me
pairing.
ask you this question before I run out of time. If you concluded that putting some reasonable limits in place and trying to find a way to enforce them would lead some percentage of your users